use your data. Always look for the data that you have, but know that there's a moment of diminishing returns. And sometimes, often, you actually need to trust your gut more than you want to. And it's this very fine balancing act. From my perspective, Jobs to be Done is just actually this very perfect match with copywriting because it helps us plan what messages make sense for the reader and what order they should be in. There's so much science in conversion copywriting, and also there's a bit of creativity in there, right? And I do find myself often drawing on those same skills that I used to use as a singer, right? Where like you're in a rehearsal hall and you don't have all the set pieces yet. You're not in the final room. You're not in the final theater. And you have to do the same thing when you're copywriting, right? There's a lot of imagination that goes into that, to making sure that the moments that are coming out on the page feel alive and real to the reader. Yeah, and it's that same skill.
Hey, welcome to the Message Market Fit podcast. I'm your host, Chris Silvestri, and if you're new here, this is a show where I chat with B2B SaaS folks in marketing, product, growth, and founders about how they join the conversation already happening in their customers' minds. We dive deep into their thinking, their systems, and their playbooks to see how they empathize with their audience and speak to them in a way that resonates, so they're compelled to take action. Join us and learn how you too can shape your messaging strategy and write copy that truly resonates and differentiates you. I'm super excited about my guest today, Carolyn Beaudoin. Carolyn is the co-founder and conversion copywriter at Boxcar Agency. In this episode, we chat about Carolyn's journey from classical musician to copywriter, her approach to creating hybrid one reader for multiple audience messaging, the importance of jobs to be done research in copywriting, strategies for effective B2B messaging and testing, and her thoughts on using AI in copywriting. Let's dive right in. Hey Carolyn, thanks so much for being here and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
I'm pretty great, thank you. So I have a lot of questions that I'm super curious to ask you about your background, about copywriting. So it's going to be a pretty nerdy chat.
Awesome.
But I think the audience will appreciate it.
Love a nerdy chat.
Exactly. So why don't we start from some of your background? I'm curious to know what led you to copywriting, conversion copywriting as well.
Yeah, the short story is conversion copywriting. I switched careers early, mid-20s, I guess I would say. I switched careers. I did all of my post-secondary education as a classical musician, which is what? Where did that come from and how did you make this switch? But I was freelancing as a copywriter on the side to put myself through school. And I realized that, hey, I actually really like this work. I really like the copywriting work. And there were a surprising number of similarities. And again, it's like, where did that come from? But because my time as a classical musician, I was actually training as an opera singer. So I spent a lot of time working with words. Wow. And so I found that there were similarities, right? When I was singing, the goal is make the message clear, make it easy for the audience to understand, help them feel their feelings, feel some emotions. Copywriting does the same thing, right? But it's in a different form. And in many ways, I found copywriting a more fulfilling piece of it's more fulfilling because I had more control over the final output and the way that it was delivered. It was less of a collaborative work and more of a solo work in many ways, right? Then that's not truly fair, right? Because often as a copywriter, you are working in a team, you're working with founders and the marketing team and potentially the growth team as well, depending on the shape of the organization. So there is a lot of collaboration, but I think there are fewer inputs, right? When you're an opera singer, you have and you have other leads and you have the chorus and you have a full orchestra. So you have all these inputs that you're working on together live. Copywriting is less live. Yeah. There's less live work as a copywriter. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I can relate totally because I play drums. I played drums for 20 years. So I like in a band, and I spoke with other copywriters who a lot of them have a musical background. So it's pretty interesting that you say, like, being able to evoke emotions and understanding people. Do you think that copywriters are also a bit of performers in a way, even if we are loners?
Yeah, I would say that we are performers. There's so much science in conversion copywriting, and also there's a bit of creativity in there, right? Particularly when, it is. There's lots of creativity that goes into the actual writing. And I do find myself often drawing on those same skills that I used to use as a singer, right? Where like you're in a rehearsal hall and you don't have all the set pieces yet. You're not in the final room. You're not in the final theater. So you're imagining stairs and you're imagining costumes and you're imagining all of these things and creating this world around you. And you have to do the same thing when you're copywriting, right? Like you don't, as I'm thinking about writing long form sales pages. I'm in the middle of a long form sales page project, and there's a lot of imagination that goes into that, to making sure that the moments that are coming out on the page feel alive and real to the reader. Yeah. And it's that same skill.
Yeah. All right, so you mentioned you started copywriting on the side. Was that, because I know that you work with Copyhackers as well, was that already with Copyhackers or was it before?
No, it was before. Yeah. Before, maybe I was freelancing for several years before I went full time. And then I was full time for a couple of years before I went in-house with Copyhackers. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Nice. How did it come about? And did you stumble on any of the guys somewhere, or did you find them online? Everything?
Yeah. It was online. I first started out as a student of Copyhackers. I did copy school. I was also in 10x freelance copywriter. I'm not sure if that exists, and I don't think it exists in that same format now, but at the time that's what it was called. And I had written some content for Copyhackers as well, and the opportunity came about, and how could I pass it up, right? I really wanted to have a chance. I think you have an agency background too, right? There's something very special about agencies. It's a little bit like, in terms of growth, professional growth. And I wanted that experience. When you're working in many agencies work very fast, and so you're required to work. And you get a lot of different projects typically happening simultaneously. It can feel like a very big stretch in terms of stretching your capacity, really, and stretching the skills and going, can I move this fast? Can I write this fast? Can I do this fast and maintain really high levels of quality in the work that I do? And I wanted that. I wanted that experience. And so that was a really good move for me, because I got that experience and I got that stretch and I got that capacity building and confidence building, frankly, in my own skills. Yeah. And mentorship. Cool. I can't actually even skim over the mentorship too. I had wonderful colleagues, and of course working with Joanna the mentorship there is very high level.
What would you say is the biggest lesson that you've taken with you from Copyhackers?
Use your data. Always look for the data that you have, but know that there's a moment of diminishing returns, and sometimes, often, you actually need to trust your gut more than you want to. And it's this very fine balancing act. And I learned that in Copyhackers, at the Copyhackers team, in the agency, and then in-house as well. That was constantly, that was something that was constantly being challenged there. I think many copywriters, we always want more research. We always want more voice of customer data, more different inputs, so that we can have a really nice round research foundation. But you can't always, you don't get everything you want.
And that's where the creativity comes into play, right? So at a certain point you have to get whatever you have and come up and try feel for what sounds good, what makes sense, and all of those, right?
Yep, exactly.
All right, so then you transition into your own agency, Boxcar Agency.
Yes.
So what do you guys do? Who do you help, and what do you do? How would you define that?
Yeah, so what we do right now is messaging strategy and copywriting execution for owned growth channels. So websites, email marketing, sometimes SMS, depending on the client, right? Who we work with, typically startups and scale-ups, often in B2B SaaS, but not always in B2B SaaS. Often if we're looking at a B2C company or an e-commerce company, typically it's a technical product. So it's something like a 3D printer, right? Where it's luxury item, high ticket price, technical aspects of the actual product that need to be broken down, so to speak, and explained in very clear, user-friendly, customer-friendly language.
Yeah. Nice. I'm curious, especially about your value proposition. So you say recover the lost revenue leaking from your marketing ecosystem, which is pretty unique. Like typically for copywriting agency, copywriters, you hear, I don't know, increase conversions, turn more visitors into customers. So I'm curious about your choice for that. What's the reasoning behind it?
The reasoning behind it is just it's based on what we've seen with our clients again and again. So because we work specifically in owned growth channels, because we work with the type of clients that we do, we often come in and we see just huge gaps in the ecosystem. And that means that you are losing revenue, right? So yes, we increase it. It's the other side of increasing conversions, right? But we have two frames here, two choices, right? Increased conversions is a gain, whereas leaking from it's a loss, right? So it's the flip side of that particular type of idea.
Nice.
Yeah. It's there, and it is true. It's leaking. Your ecosystem is leaking.
Do you think that's it can also be like lower hanging fruits typically for customers?
This is exactly the thing. Often, not always, often though, we have clients, they come in and they say, okay, we need a new fill in the blank. We need a new homepage, or we need a new onboarding flow, or we need a new long form sales page. And we go, wait, hold up. What is going on in your entire ecosystem? You might need a new homepage. You might need a new long form sales page, but the first problem is often not the actual problem. And I'm sure you've seen that as well.
Yeah, totally. So I listened to other podcasts and you talk a lot about writing for multiple audiences, right? Especially when it comes to a homepage. How do you think that kind of challenges the typical rule of one, right? For like your one reader. So if a client comes to you and say, oh, we need to write for this persona, what would you tell them?
So let's unpack the context first, because the context really matters here. So yeah, if they're coming to us and they say, hey, we have this one persona that we're targeting and this is it. Okay, maybe we'll agree with you, but let's dig into the research first. Often when they come to us and say, truthfully, more often than not, it's not just one persona. They often come to us and we have 10 personas that we're writing for. Let's solve for that. And often that's an account-based marketing approach to things, which is not necessarily a bad approach. There's a very clear need for it, particularly when you have sales teams in the organization, which many of our clients do. But that poses a very unique challenge for homepages, because you can't typically write for 10 different audiences on your homepage. You could, but should you? And do you have the technical pieces in your tech stack to actually make that possible? Often the answer is no. That is more likely the scenario that we face. And that's where that hybrid one reader comes in. Yeah, we are challenging the rule of one, but it's challenging it in a thoughtful and strategic way, rather than just throwing it out the window and saying, we have a bunch of different readers that we have to solve for on this page, and we're just going to write like a general page, throwing out all of the understanding and just focusing on like selling the product. No, instead we look at, again, conduct research, right? Figure out the jobs to be done. We look at messaging, we look at research, we look at even like the way that we plan ecosystems around jobs. So we conduct jobs to be done based research. Typically the 10 accounts turns into 2 to 3 jobs to be done. Then from there, we can further basically compare and contrast those jobs, the detailed maps, find the similarities, and use that as this hybrid one reader where we understand at least the similarities between all of these audiences. I like to think about it like a Venn diagram, right? You have your different jobs, different research pools in the middle, hybrid one reader. Use that for your homepage. It is typically higher level messaging, which you would frankly expect from a homepage anyways, that's trying to solve for 10 audiences. But it's still specific enough that it's speaking to desired outcomes and key anxieties, often key pulls of the new, specific aspects of the product that are compelling to all of those core jobs to be done, the people that are really right fit for your audience, for your product.
Right. Yeah. So how would you recommend people find or get to their hybrid one reader?
Research.
What kind of research do you conduct?
Yeah. So yes, research is the foundation. The types of research that we conduct: jobs to be done, interviews, often also custom surveys that are also structured around the jobs to be done framework, conducting analyses of public reviews. What else do we do? Product. There's a bunch of activities that we do. These are the core things. Also chat transcripts, sales recordings. I love when clients have sales recordings, man, that is like gold. And it's so sad because it feels like so many teams just let those sales recordings
Die.
sit. They just die. Exactly. They're dying somewhere in the cloud. Nobody looks at them, or like maybe the new sales team member looks at them, but they just don't make their way over to marketing for some reason, which is a huge loss. It's a huge loss. But we love sales recordings, especially if you have sales recordings that follow that customer from first contact through to we're signing the agreement and or we're onboarding or we're in proof of concept. We love that when we can have access to that customer journey from start to finish. That is gold. That is research gold. Yeah. So there's lots of different things that we do on the research side of things. And truly I would not say that there's a typical research looks a little bit different with every client, right? Because every client has different assets that they have access to and slightly different sales processes and that. So it can change from client to client, but those are the core pieces of research that we typically do and or look at. Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say, like, because it's happening to me as well, it happened in the past, when a client, they either don't have time to do some of the research, or they saw that, for example, they get zero response from surveys because their audience is not engaged. So what would you tell them? What's the maybe 80-20 research activities that you recommend? These are must-dos.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And it is something that we bump up against as well. Typically, the priority activity would push for, I mean, if you don't have sales recordings, you can't get survey responses, we need to conduct interviews. So that's one piece of the puzzle. Sometimes there is always this trade-off, right, of being like comprehensive and thorough and detailed and moving fast. Lots of startups and scale-ups want to move fast. Interviews take time. And so sometimes if we have a client that's, hey, we want to move fast, we have hundreds of hours of sales recordings. Can you work with these instead of doing interviews? Because they know that we can move through sales recordings faster often than we can conduct interviews because of all the setup that has to happen with interviews. And in some cases, if we can take an initial look at the sales recordings and say, yes, these are solid sales recordings, we can see from start to first contact, like I just said, first contact to signing the agreement, can you use this? Yes, we can use that, because often we're hearing live as anxieties are coming up, we can observe them, right? Do they look confused as you're explaining this particular aspect of the product? Are they really excited? There's all of these nonverbal cues that come with sales recordings. So that would be a potential trade-off too. If we wanted to move faster, sales recordings are a really great key. Public reviews aren't always possible depending on what the team, what the product, the brand has initiated prior to that. Some companies are really great about collecting public reviews and some are not, and they haven't prioritized that as an activity. And so then in those cases, there aren't a lot of public reviews to pull. And then you have to look at those other research sources. So there's not just one way to answer this question, right? To us, it's all a matter of trade-offs, helping the client meet their goals on the approximate timeline that they're hoping to reach them at. Obviously, if they say yesterday, we can't. Yesterday is not a reasonable, that's not an appropriate timeline.
That's often.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, speaking of research again, I'm pretty curious about one aspect, which is the UX design aspect, because when I first time that I stumbled on Copyhackers, conversion copywriting in general, I was actually coming at it, like the agency work that I'd done I was a UX lead, for a usability testing startup. And so the first thing that jumped out was, wow, like a lot of this research that you do for conversion copy is pretty common to what you do for usability as well, like usability testing, heat maps, recordings, all that stuff. And so I was wondering, what's your opinion on what type of UX skills or patterns copywriters or marketers should learn that they are not learning about?
UX is really important. And I'm so glad you highlighted that too. So definitely you should be familiar with basically every tool that exists in Hotjar. So heat maps, the user recordings, usability testing, like actually conducting user testing, you should be familiar with that. And obviously heat maps, they can be broken down depending on which tool you're looking at. They might look you can have heat maps, the confetti, I call them confetti maps, right? The ones that have confetti all over the place. Click maps, tap maps. If you're looking at mobile, you should be familiar as well with being able to understanding really that mobile UX patterns and desktop UX patterns are completely different, and you need to be familiar with both and be reviewing both, particularly if you're on the e-commerce side of things. A lot of, generally speaking, which I hate generalities, but here we are. Often a lot of e-commerce traffic is mobile traffic, and you need to consider that as well. I think that's a good sort of general overview of the UX skills that a copywriter should have.
Yeah. There's one other thing that I pay a lot of attention sometimes, especially when you do a complete website redesign, because maybe from the research you realize that the navigation doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
And it could help a lot people understand like who you help, because you have maybe persona pages or solutions pages. And it can also help people understand what you do, like how your product is divided and so on. So do you also look at navigation, and what kind of optimizations do you do if yes?
Yes, we often find ourselves when we're working on web projects, which is regularly, we do work sometimes on navigation if we're making recommendations for that. We like to observe that information through user recordings. So we would be watching typically on the homepage, and supplement that through Google Analytics with a big sort of asterisk there of clients don't always trust their Google Analytics. The data is a fun thing where, depending on the client that you're working with, some will have high levels of trust in their tools, some will have low levels of trust in their tools for various reasons. And so this, again, is one of those areas where we hope that they have high levels of trust, but we have to ask, and we work with what we have, and we do the best with what we have, is how I would say that, right? And it depends on the client. If you had asked me 5 years ago, I think I would have answered, it depends less, which is frustrating now. I recognize that hearing it depends is such a frustrating answer, but the further on in my career I get, the more I realize that it does depend. Very little of what we do actually is fully black and white, and it totally depends on the client and what we have available to us, and then using good judgment and getting it live, testing if we can, but understanding that we can't test in all situations. And so sometimes we have to lean on our skills and our experience and observations and make a judgment call and see and observe afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So when it comes to the hybrid one reader, I'm curious, before we move forward from that, how do you think the hybrid one reader's messaging also works for social media, or is it something strictly specific to website and home pages?
So I think it would work for social media. That's not really something that we work in. Yeah. So I can't say with 100% confidence, yes, it will 100% work. Yeah. But I would say that it is something worth trying based on our experience. If it's working on websites and it's working in emails and it's working in SMS, it's probably going to work in your social channels. But it would depend on a lot of factors, including probably the channel that you're posting on, the audience, right? The audience that you have available to you, who's generally seeing that message on that channel. Does that suit the particular channel? The context matters as well.
All right. So next question is about, so you mentioned jobs to be done research, right? Interviews, right? How do you see jobs to be done research versus more like traditional research? Why do you think jobs to be done research is helpful for writing copy?
Jobs to be done research is helpful for writing copy because it puts the customer and or prospect, depending on where you're writing for in the sort of buying journey, what assets you're writing for, it puts them first. It's also, I would say, a kind of holistic way about thinking about the buying journey. You're looking at the entire thing, you're not approaching an asset with tunnel vision. You're looking at the entire buying journey, understanding, okay, if they're here right now, this asset sits here in this buying journey, right? But we know that we need to move them here to get to the purchase. We understand that all of these different objections come up between here and here. So now we can plan that page. Like, it's, from my perspective, Jobs to Be Done is just actually this very perfect match with copywriting, because it helps us plan what messages make sense for the reader and what order they should be in, which is, there's so much to that. That's such a big part of copywriting that actually I think a lot of maybe people that don't write copy understand, right? They just think, oh, it's just putting good words on a page and like making it look nice. And no, we actually have a lot to do with messaging, ordering, and messaging hierarchy on the page itself. That's a huge part, and Jobs to Be Done is huge for that particular aspect.
Yeah. And I know that you read the book Demand Side Sales 101 by Bob Moster, right? And he basically uses Jobs to Be Done in sales. But again, as I was reading, I was like, oh my God, these are all like questions that can like totally help with copy, right? Yeah. And one great thing that he does that I love is how he basically sets the stage for people to remember more details about their own buying journey. He says something like, pretend that you were filming a documentary, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So I was wondering, for you, how do you make sure, apart from trying to get recent customers, that they remember the buying journey, how do you make sure that they are able to reliably recollect their experience when you do interviews?
So it's a funny thing, that particular piece, right? Often, okay, so there's two parts to that. The first part is, yes, we totally use that line. Pretend we're filming a documentary. We totally use that line. That would be so silly not to use that line. It's such a good line. And it really gets them in the frame of, okay, like we're doing something. They want the details. They want the visuals. They want the like moments and the frustration that sort of taps into that for an interviewee. The other thing that we do is practice an incredible amount of humility, which is a weird thing, right? And what I mean by that is, often, again, because we're working with technical products and sometimes we're interviewing very technical people that know way more about what they're, the way that they're using the product and the way that it fits into their life than we do at that particular moment in our learning journey and our research journey for this particular product. And so we typically say right off the top of the interview, we're not experts in this. We're working on messaging, we're working on marketing, and we're not experts. We're not developers, or we're not whatever space that they live in professionally. I might ask some questions that feel a little bit basic, and I really appreciate you unpacking that for me. And so really, again, setting the stage that they are the expert in this space as well, like handing them that authority and agency in the interview. And then throughout the interview saying, I'm really curious about whatever they just said, right? Repeat the phrase that they just said. Can you tell me what that means to you? Or I don't really understand what X means. Can you tell me what that means to you? What does that mean to you? It can feel uncomfortable to ask those questions. And what I've observed is that folks who are relatively new to interviewing, they never dig deep enough. It's because it's uncomfortable to ask those questions, because there's this sort of weird dynamic that's happening, especially if you're interviewing on Zoom. There is a little bit of this dynamic of, am I the expert in this interview, or are you the expert in this interview? So we like to just set it up right off the bat. You're the expert. You, interviewee, are the expert. We're the person learning from you. There are no right or wrong answers. We're just trying to learn here. Yeah. And then consistently reinforcing that throughout the interview. That helps. Yeah. That actually really helps, because I think, alleviates some of the stress. Weirdly, I do think interviewees feel stressed when they're speaking to an interviewer. And alleviating that stress, giving them that agency, that authority, that also understanding that there is no right answer, helps to alleviate the stress, which helps set them at ease, which can help them be a little bit more reliable and accurately recall.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, also because what I noticed, if you don't preface that, a lot of times, especially if it's technical people, they will say, like before explaining or going deeper, they will say, I don't know how familiar you are with XYZ. And that kind of interrupts the flow of the interview totally. So
Yeah.
I love that you prefaced that. Yeah, yeah. All right, so speaking of technical audiences, I'm super curious about how do you go about testing messaging? And we talked about usability testing, and especially with B2B, it's super hard to first find good candidates for usability testing that know what you're talking about, and then get like reliable feedback on, especially on messaging, because you can get feedback on how they use the website, but understanding it's a different thing.
Yeah.
So what are your favorite testing methodologies and approaches?
I split the experimentation, what I would consider the experimentation phase of our work, into two camps. We have validation, which we look at as pre-live, pre-going live, right? So we have typically 5-second testing in there, which is great for being relatively cheap to run and fast to run, but is not great for actually getting feedback, typically feedback from your audience. And we really just use that as a gut check for, is this message going to totally flop? Is it clear? Is there a high likelihood of flopping, right? Checking for that.
So understanding and clarity, basically.
Exactly. But resonance, no. That's not, a 5-second test can't help you with that. User testing with either a hi-fi, like a hi-fi, what I would call wireframe, or even a design. That is an ideal way to validate messaging. And I would say that most of our clients do not. I'll preface that by saying there are several challenges with that approach. One, it takes time. It takes actually sometimes quite a lot of time, particularly if you are pulling your own audience from your user base. If they're not already lined up, it can take time to schedule that. It takes time to set that up. It's often a custom setup to really test properly for resonance and to make sure that the user is using the page, but like all of the things that you need to do for user testing. It's a bit of a custom setup, so there's time there. And if you can't pull from your audience, and even if you can, it can be expensive to run. So again, when we think about our clients who are like, let's move fast, they don't often afford us the time to do that type of testing. So that's the validation side of things, right? That's pre-live. You can also do user testing after it goes live. Again, clients don't always afford that in their project scope, or allow that in their project scope, I should say. On the testing side of things, so A/B testing is great and not always possible. And I think that sometimes when I say that, maybe other copywriters and marketers too get surprised by that. What? You're a conversion copywriter. Don't you write to test? Yes, we always write to test. But the reality is that you can't always test it. You can't. Sometimes the client doesn't have enough traffic. Sometimes they just have so many other priorities, and it just doesn't make sense to spend resources. Testing takes resources. And so if you don't have the resources to devote to that and do all of the other things that you need to, don't test it. Don't test it. Conduct a before-after analysis. Make sure that you're getting signals of resonance, signals of conversion, signals that it's working, but move on to the other thing. Again, this is the context of the type of clients that we work with, that they just, sometimes wonderfully, we can test it and we do see results, and we can point to that test and say, look, the control, our challenger is the new control. We beat the control by whatever. We raised MRR on those accounts by 53%. We're rolling out the challengers, the new control. Awesome. We love that. We love that when you can do that, when the client has the resources to do that, but you can't always do it. And we know that. We live in the real world.
Yes. Do you also test for email? Maybe testing subject lines, or
yes.
What kind of testing do you do?
There are a number of different tests that you can run in emails. What's nice about email marketing testing is that it is often, but not always, lower lift to test, which is good in many ways. But again, and I think this is something that is not always as obvious, is that when we think about testing a website, I think it's very frequent that we think about traffic, right? Do you have enough traffic to actually test this? Do you have enough conversions over a set period of time that we can accurately test this? With emails, for some reason, what we've observed is that traffic piece of the puzzle gets totally missed. And we can it's right there in the interface. We can easily implement an A/B test on our subject line, so we're just going to do it, even though this is a low traffic or a very specific automation or campaign. There are all of these sort of edge cases, but they don't think about the traffic. And traffic still impacts your testing in emails. So that's something that we are often working with clients on. We might write 2 or 3 variations for them that they could test. But can they test it? Should they test it? Those are different. Those different pieces of the puzzle. But yes, we test subject lines, we test previews, we test from names. Sometimes we test body copy as well. Obviously, we would want to isolate variables there. Sometimes we test actually just like totally, we test design, frankly, and by design, by extension, it's also copy. Thinking about e-commerce clients that we've worked with where we test copy heavy, so like a plain text style email versus a heavily designed email. And that's done actually at the sort of like flow or automation level, right? Where often in email marketing platforms, you can test the body copy itself within, like you've implemented the email, but we actually wanted to test, okay, let's test what is the overall impact from a kind of flow level. We wanted to control that journey. So then we're like, okay, we either send the customer, the contact into the design heavy path or the copy heavy path versus just testing one email. So that was a full journey testing. So there's lots of different things. That's the long way of saying there's lots of different things to test in email marketing, but should you test it?
Control.
Yeah, it is. In many ways, it is easier to control. And it's, again, we come back to that question of should you test it? Can you test it? Should you test it?
Depends.
Yeah, it depends. Exactly.
So I have another question that might be a bit esoteric, but let me ask you. So you talked about this, so it's something that you already talked about it, which is buyer modalities, which is basically, for people who don't know, it's basically understanding what types of decision makers people are. And it's something that I've never seen. It's not research that I see from clients. Like they never do it. Like they do a typical personas, they're typical. So how do you go about this? And why do you think it's helpful?
So this is part of the work that we do as we're mapping out the jobs to be done maps. And so this is done through observation. We're not asking the customer directly, would you consider yourself a fast-paced decision maker or a slow-paced? They're going to be like, what are you talking about? I don't know. This is more done, this type of research and strategic recommendation piece of the puzzle is more done through observation. So thinking about the types of things that we start to see in the map, in this particular map, are we seeing that the seeker is really heavily motivated by case studies or testimonials or those sorts of pieces of proof that might indicate that they're a little bit potentially humanistic, especially like when you start to dig into, okay, so what about that particular, when you dig into those pieces, you often hear so-and-so is somebody that I aspire to, that sort of thing. You're like, okay, you're probably there's a little bit of a humanistic element here that we could consider. Or you might hear somebody talk through their buying journey and you find actually, okay, this type of seeker is actually super fast paced and they're moving through their buyer journey way faster than all these different pieces have to come into play. And so what I'm getting at is that this is really done through observation, not through a direct research activity, more generalized across the research phase of the project. It's helpful because it helps us start to plan the copy so that we're solving really nicely and prioritizing the types of seekers that we are hoping to attract, right? Those types of buyers that we're hoping to attract. It helps us lay out the page in a way that's compelling. And we can, again, it's all connected back to that jobs to be done research that we've done. It's just a different way of thinking about how to use that information in a more tactical way when you're laying out the copy on the page. It's helpful, right? But it is a little bit of a hot take as well, right? I know that there's a whole camp of CROs out there that are like, no, decision maker modalities, it's based in personality, personality testing and Myers-Briggs, which is its own big can of worms. And I acknowledge that it is a big can of worms. It is questionable science, definitely. And it is a helpful heuristic when it's based in research. Like when it's actually based in research, we don't just make a decision based on nothing. We make the decision based on research. The research guides the decision. Then we use it to help us lay out the page. Yeah.
And how do you combine that decision maker style with the hybrid one reader? Do you try to give one of those styles to this hybrid one reader?
Great question. I think what we typically do is think about it as a scale, right? If we were to think about a pie, we have all those decision makers, modalities. Often you see that sort of laid out equally, right? You have maybe a pie and there's 4 equal quarters. Yeah. But we look at the hybrid one reader and think about, okay, so what are we seeing in this map, right? We might know all of the other maps. Maybe they have similar, what we've decided are similar decision maker modalities, maybe not. But we look at the hybrid one reader map and we, again, make judgment calls based on observation, based on what we're seeing in that map to figure out, okay, so how big is each piece of that pie? And then we prioritize accordingly. I can't recall a time where we've said, actually, we're just going to totally ignore the slow-paced decision makers. We don't typically do that. It's more about prioritization and understanding the balance for the page. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I have 2 last questions. One is, what do you see being the biggest challenge when it comes to messaging copy for your clients?
The biggest challenge in what realm? In collecting research, in translating that message?
If you were to narrow down to one, it's typically the main problem that they come to you, but then you dig deeper and then you find, okay, this is what you're struggling with.
So the main problem, they come to us and they say, hey, we need new copy because it's not converting. We need new copy. And we're like, but do you need new copy? Yes, usually they need new copy, but they also need the research and the messaging to make the new copy really great and resonate and convert. And so that's a mindset shift, right? That is actually a mindset shift. We love the clients that come to us and say, hey, we understand that we don't understand our audience. That's often hear that from founders, right? Where they're like, I built this thing and I think I know what I built, but I'm really realizing I actually don't know, right? Like we're getting conversions and that's great, but there's a disconnect here that's happening. And I think my buyers are buying for a different reason than I was building it, which is interesting, right? But that's very much a case of you're so close. When you're a founder, you're often so close to your product that you need outside eyes to come in and gut check you. And sometimes you're right. And sometimes it's, oh no, actually people are buying our product for a very different reason. And now they, as the founder, have this new appreciation for their audience. Keeps them close to the audience, which is like critical and super valuable. Yeah, that's a big challenge though. That's not a small, I wish it was a small challenge. Actually, I don't, right? Otherwise, why would it exist? Exactly. It is a big challenge. It is a really big challenge but it's an important challenge and it's one that we're always happy to help with.
Yeah, nice. Finally, I wanted to ask you, and this might be another hot take depending on how it goes, but do you use AI and how do you use it for copy?
Oh, yes. Would this be an interview with a copywriter though if we didn't talk about AI? No.
Exactly.
No. No. Yes, we do use AI. We don't use AI for copywriting at this time. Areas that we use AI for: note-taking. We love Fathom Note-Taker. It's a great tool. We like Google Meets AI generated transcription. Those are pretty solid transcriptions and it's very convenient that it is just right in your Google Drive, ready to go. We use ChatGPT for SOP documentation, actually. It's pretty handy. We like Loom in-house. We really like Loom. Loom has transcripts that they auto-generate, so you're able to really pretty easily take that and create SOPs from them. What else? Sometimes we use ChatGPT as sort of a brainstorming partner, but we regularly test it on writing copy and we're just not happy with it. And the reason that we're not happy with it is just it takes longer to fix the copy than it does to just write the copy. Like to write and there's this whole art and science to prompting as well, right? And totally understand that and respect that and have worked on our prompts. And even still, we're just not happy with the output because it is why would we spend more time fixing ChatGPT than we would just writing the copy? Additionally, AI is typically writing. It's the way it works. It writes by association, not by actually understanding or feeling or all of the things that we talked about earlier that are so critically important for copywriters to be able to tap into. It can't. AI doesn't feel. Not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet.
AGI.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. It's been super cool. Thank you so much for sharing all these details. So where can people find you? They can find you on your website, boxcar.agency, right?
Yep, exactly. And LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn. And what else?
Yep. Those are the two
All right.
places. Those are really the two places. Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn every week sharing messaging, strategy, research, copywriting, that whole gamut, everything that we've spoken about for the last few minutes, I'm talking about on LinkedIn, and then over on our website, Boxcar.agency.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much for listening to the pod. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, the best thing you could do to support the show and help me as a small business owner would be to leave a review. Head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and let me know what you think. If you don't want to miss future episodes, subscribe, and if you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, just hit me up on LinkedIn at Christopher Silvestri or Twitter at SilvestriChris. Speak to you next time.